Good morning, everyone. This is my first attempt to do a live recording for the Bolton Lodge of the Theosophical Society. I'm doing it from the very luxurious surroundings of my kitchen, so hopefully it'll work. I'm using my ancient computer, so probably the quality and sound won't be very good. But this is just an experiment that I'm trying, and hopefully I can use perhaps my phone or my iPad later on. Maybe I'll get better quality from those. But anyway, to start off with, I'm going to light the candle of harmony. In fact, I've got 3 candles of harmony, representing the triad: heart, mind, body, manners. So while these candles burn, may there be harmony in your hearts and souls, wherever you may be in the world, and whatever you're doing. So, as I've said, this is the start of the kitchen sessions. It's probably the best place in the house to do the recordings. So we'll start off with a little meditation. I'm going to sound the Tibetan singing bowl, and then we'll have a few moments of quiet. I'm just going to sound it like a bell. I'm not going to do the whole thing. Okay, it looks a little strange because there's a slight lapse between what I'm seeing on the screen and actually what I'm doing live. Quite a few seconds for some reason, I don't know why that is. So it looks a bit weird. But anyway, in these difficult times, I think one of the main things that is needed is a little kindness. And I think kindness is underestimated, because really is a great power, kindness, to be kind. And it also shows that we're recognising the divinity in others. You know, the fact that we're all one inwardly. We're all divine beings. And as Pythagoras said, take heart, for the race of man is divine. And in these troubled times, it seems that there's a lot of division being caused between people. You know, a lot of ill will, bad feeling, and also a lot of heroism and a lot of good things. But we need to get back to kindness and to realising, what we truly are inwardly. We're not creatures of a day, we're eternal beings. And all the things that affect us on a lower level, they're all just transitory, they're just passing. The true self is untouched by all of this, as I'll probably be putting forward more in the talk. So the talk I'm giving is called A Philosophy of Kindness, mainly in theosophical teachings, but also in other sources too. So H.P. Blavatsky states in her first letter to the American Conventions in 1888, Theosophy is the perfect harmonizing of the divine with the human in man, the adjustment of his godlike qualities and aspirations, and their sway over the terrestrial or animal passions in him. Kindness, absence of every ill feeling or selfishness, charity, goodwill to all beings, and perfect justice to others as to oneself are its chief features. He who teaches Theosophy preaches the gospel of goodwill, and the converse of this is also true. He who preaches the gospel of goodwill teaches Theosophy. And later in the same letter, the function of Theosophists is to open men's hearts and understandings to charity, justice, and generosity, attributes which belong specifically to the human kingdom and are natural to man when he has developed the qualities of a human being. Theosophy teaches the animal man to be a human man, and when people have learned to think and feel as truly human beings should feel and think, they will act humanely, and works of charity, justice and generosity will be done spontaneously by all. So it's coming to realise as I said earlier, what we truly are, that we're not these personalities, that they're transient, that we are much more than that. And this reminds me of this modern movement that's called random acts of kindness, which I think is a good thing. Now, the Buddhists call someone who has awakened to their true nature a true man, or of course a true woman. And the Taoists apply the term real human to someone who has realised what it is to be an enlightened being. Many of the ancient Indian texts state that it is very difficult to obtain a human birth. Well, this may mean that although we have a physical body, most people are living mainly animalistic lives, concerned with finding food, procreation, building a nest, and all the basic things that drive all sentient beings when they reach a certain level of consciousness. So Theosophy attempts to teach the animal man and woman to be a human man and woman. Of course, all these basic animal requirements are essential to life on this planet, but they are not the be-all and end-all of existence. Something else is needed to make us flower into these truly human beings. The one thing that is sadly lacking in the world today is the concept and the idea of the living of a life of spirituality. Without it, all decisions made by individuals, groups and nations will be based upon a limited perception of what is meant by being alive, by being a living being. It is an awakening to a realisation of the oneness of all things and a leaving behind of all the animosity towards those who we believe to be different from us or who do not share our opinions. Awakening to our spiritual nature transforms our view of the world and our fellow creatures. When we realise what we are in reality, then we are on the way to becoming real humans. Once we begin to see ourselves as eternal beings and to make that realization a living reality in our lives, then we enter a new stage of consciousness. And although we live, move and have our being in the same surroundings as before, we in fact are living in a different world because we are perceiving the same world in a more enlightened manner. In fact, as regards spiritual progress, we don't actually go anywhere. But as our senses and consciousness are refined, we are aware of deeper levels and dimensions to our perceptions of the illusions that give us credence in an ever-changing universe. To find stability, we need to be aware of the unchanging dimension to our own being. As the spirit filters down through our ever-densifying levels of consciousness, it illuminates and hones our various principles. Our mind becomes purified and capable of appreciating the higher aspects of existence. Our emotions become sanctified to a deeper reality, and our physical body is transformed into a temple of the Holy Grail. The influence of our divine nature manifests in our daily lives as a purified conscience, a highly sensitive recognition of the suffering of others caused by their ignorance of their true being, and a love and compassion for all sentient beings as emanating from and returning eventually to the same source. Also, we can see that no matter what events befall us in our lives, whether we designate them good or bad, if we have the right attitude, if we have the line of life meditation, the desire to live in the light of our higher self, then all that comes to pass is to help us to realize that we are denizens of eternity and children of the light. Our reaction to our assimilation of the lessons learned to help us grow on our pilgrimage becomes of paramount importance. And as I wrote elsewhere in another talk called Grow as the Flower Grows, in this world, basing our consciousness on the transitory and the perishable, we are often confused, distressed and depressed because we are mentally tossed about like a boat on rough seas. We have built our house on sand and not on sturdy rock, as the Bible tells us. It is all a matter of finding our inner self, that place of sanctuary where we are beyond the machinations of the world around us. And we can begin to discover who we really are, not what the world in general tells us that we are. We will become free from labels and able to stand firm no matter what life throws at us. So then, we are much more than we think we are at the moment. We have gained something very precious on our journey, and that is self-awareness. The ability to take our progress in hand and proceed by self-induced and self-devised efforts, as the secret doctrine tells us. And we are able to contemplate the world on a higher level and realize that we are multi-dimensional beings according to the teachings of all the great spiritual teachers of the world. We should strive towards that understanding, each to the limits of his or her ability. So, like the flower finding its way from the dark earth out into the sunlight and growing in that light until it finally blossoms, so we blossom in the beauty and light of our higher self. We come to an awareness of who and what we truly are, not what the material orientated world has made us believe that we are, with all its limitations and divisions and misunderstandings and misrepresentations of what it is to be truly human. In these difficult times, let us step back mentally and draw upon our divine nature, which is untouched by all that goes on in this material world. Our true life is way beyond the temporary illusions of this plane of existence. And although it may not seem like this at the moment, all those things that cause us pain on a physical level will pass in time, and no matter how dark life becomes, there is a happy ending for everyone in the long run. Now, in the story Fantasies by the Victorian writer George MacDonald, and this is my favourite fiction story of all time, at the very end, the hero hears a voice in the sound of the rustling leaves in the trees overhead. It seems to say, "A great good is coming. Is coming. Is coming to thee, Anodus." Anodus being the hero of the book. If we, in our silent moments, can hear the voice of our inner self, we would know that always these words are being whispered, and at each time, for each one of us, they will become a reality. A great good is coming to all of us. Now, the present Dalai Lama has said that his religion is kindness, and kindness in its true sense is one of the signs that we are becoming truly human at last. I remember reading something by H.P. Blavatsky in which her students complained that rather than giving them instructions on how to develop their psychic powers and produce phenomena, she was instead giving them advice that they could hear in their grandmother's sermon. H.P.B. replied that if they could not live by that advice, then they would not be trusted with psychic powers of any kind, or they would be sure to misuse them. Of course, I'm just paraphrasing that. So it is obvious that the injection of a little kindness in society today would make a big difference. A Russian proverb says that a kind word is like a spring day. A kind word is like a spring day. And this is further reinforced by a Buddhist precept. Condemn no man in his absence, and when forced to reprove, do so to his face, but gently, and in words full of charity and compassion. For the human heart is like the kusuli plant. It opens its cup to the sweet morning dew, and closes it before a heavy shower of rain. Kindness softens the human heart and provides a loving insight into the sufferings of others, not just humans, but also all the sentient life that shares this planet with us. In Sanskrit, the word maitri is translated as loving kindness and encourages active goodwill towards all beings. Now, Jesus taught that we should love our enemies and bless those that curse us, and the Buddha was reported as saying that hatred does not cease by hatred. Hatred only ceases by love. This makes sense, as to send out angry thoughts to someone we believe is doing wrong will only increase their store of anger and make them even worse. Whereas loving thoughts may actively help them to overcome whatever makes them act in this negative way. Most people respond to words and actions that touch their hearts and souls in a positive and uplifting way. Maybe not everyone, but 99% of the population would. There's very few people who are totally evil. Anne Frank wrote in her diary, "How lovely that everyone, great and small, can make a contribution toward introducing justice straight away. And you can always give something, even if It is only kindness. This, of course, is easy to write, and not many of us are able to exercise such self-control in certain situations, but it does give us something to aspire towards. Leo Tolstoy stated that if humanity had been able to live up to the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, then there would have been no need for the police, armies, or the sort of governments that we have now. The rule is not kindness and compassion, but coercion and often violence. It is easy to see the power of kindness in the actions of many people and organisations that work for the amelioration of the suffering of humans, animals, and even the plant kingdom. They are very aware of the destruction of the environment being brought about by the actions of those to whom money is the only God, and who will go to any lengths to obtain another bauble in this busy marketplace we call society. Do not reports of the compassionate actions of others often reduce us to tears, and the cruel incidents of life dampen our spirits, proving how inwardly we are all brothers and sisters, and what affects one affects all, that are sensitive to such things. Conscience is a sign that our inner self is awakening at last, and kindness is certainly a stage to making that a reality in our lives. So, as mentioned earlier, there is a movement dedicated to random acts of kindness. These do not have to be great charitable actions. Even a cup of cold water given to someone who really needs it can have a wonderful effect on the recipient. It is all a matter of showing that in this often cruel world there are people who still care. And as long as there are such, there is always hope, despite the negative news that we hear all the time. If you have a light, don't hide it under a bushel, please. Among my favourite lines in The Voice of the Silence by H.P. Blavatsky are these: "Let thy soul lend its ear to every cry of pain, like as the lotus bears its heart to drink the morning sun. Let not the fierce sun dry one tear of pain before thyself hast wiped it from the sufferer's eye, but let each burning human tear drop on thy heart and there remain, nor ever brush it off until the pain that caused it is removed." These, of course, again, are not easy words to put into action in our lives, but they are something to think about and perhaps aspire to. It is this kind of attitude that is sorely needed to help to bring an end to the insanity that seems to be running through the world at the moment. Now, a book I was reading recently, I actually only read a small part of it, was called Humankind, A Hopeful History by Rutger Bregman. And this puts forward the idea that humans are inherently good, and that the media will always emphasise the bad. He states that amidst disasters like the World Wars, the sinking of the Titanic, and 9/11, far from panicking, most people remained calm and helped each other. So we know from our experience that when some sort of tragedy occurs, whether a natural disaster or otherwise, that people do rally round to give support. At such times, their better nature tends to come to the fore. Theosophically, we might say that when faced with such overwhelming odds, that perhaps they fall back upon their higher self, and even have some intimation of their immortality. But this is just speculation. Yet it seems at these times we do become aware of the fact that inwardly we are all one. H.P. Blavatsky states in an article, World Improvement or World Deliverance, that every man and woman, of course, has a responsive chord in his nature that will vibrate and respond to words of kindness and of truth. Well, this I think applies to most of the world's population. As I said earlier, there may be exceptions, but certainly if we are to work towards a universal brotherhood of humanity, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste or colour, we need to work towards gaining the ability to realise that we all share one consciousness, no matter what colour we are or what our outer culture is. So let's look a little deeper at the quotes I used at the beginning of this talk. She says, HPB, that we need to practice kindness, absence of every ill feeling or selfishness, charity, goodwill to all beings, and perfect justice to others as to oneself. One of the great barriers to practicing kindness is selfishness. There's a tendency in modern society and education to promote the idea that we should put ourselves first and to think of number one, and in many New Age teachings that we should promote self-love first, as if we don't love ourselves, how can we love others? But to love ourselves will not necessarily lead us to love others. To love ourselves as part of humanity is more effective, otherwise we can fall into the trap of separateness, which The Voice of the Silence by H.P. Blavatsky regards as a great, dire heresy. Ill feeling always accompanies selfishness. Why do we have ill feelings towards someone? Have they wounded our pride or vanity? Have they insulted us or our family? Do they act in ways we do not understand or may even seem repulsive to us? All these attitudes stem from this great, dire heresy of separateness that weans us from the rest. So to quote from The Key to Theosophy, another book by H.P. Blavatsky, look for a moment at what you would call the concrete facts of human society. Contrast the lives not only of the masses, of the people, but many of those who are called the middle and upper classes, with what they might be under healthier and nobler conditions, where justice, kindness and love were paramount, instead of the selfishness, indifference and brutality which now too often seem to reign supreme. All good and evil things in humanity have their roots in human character, and this character is, and has been, conditioned by the endless chain of cause and effect. Well, this conditioning applies to the future as well as to the present and the past. Selfishness, indifference and brutality can never be the normal state of the race. To believe so will be to despair of humanity, and that no theosophist can ever do. That's an important point. No matter what happens, never despair of humanity. I mentioned earlier Pythagoras, take heart, for the race of man is divine. He's saying the same thing. Talking how we can best help our struggling brothers and sisters, she says in the same book, will the proposed action tend to promote that true brotherhood, which it is the aim of Theosophy to bring about? No real Theosophist will have much difficulty in applying such a test. Once he is satisfied of this, his duty will lie in the direction of forming public opinion. And this can be attained only by inculcating those higher and nobler conceptions of public and private duties which lie at the root of all spiritual and material improvement. In every conceivable case, he himself must be a centre of spiritual action, and from him and his own daily individual life must radiate those higher spiritual forces which alone can regenerate his fellow men. If the action of one reacts on the lives of all, and this is the true scientific idea, that it is only by all men becoming brothers and all women sisters and by all practicing in their daily lives true brotherhood and sisterhood, that the real human solidarity, which lies at the root of the elevation of the race, can ever be attained. It is this action and interaction, this true brotherhood and sisterhood, in which each shall live for all and all for each, which is one of the fundamental theosophical principles that every theosophist should be bound not only to teach, but to carry out in his or her individual life. End of quote. She also says, Theosophy first, Theosophy last. Be a theosophist. Work for Theosophy. Theosophy first, Theosophy last. Be a theosophist. Work for Theosophy. We can also see that selfishness is not just an individual thing. One could be selfish as regards one's family, town, country, or even planet. The time may not be far off when we have to learn to cooperate with the inhabitants of other planets. Not make armed forces, spiritual armed forces against spirituality. I think in America they're even thinking of making a kind of galactic sort of armed army or something like that. So we're always thinking about fighting against other people and even other planets. To go back to the quote at the beginning, she goes on to say, he who teaches Theosophy preaches the gospel of goodwill, and the converse of this is true also. He who preaches the gospel of goodwill teaches Theosophy. HPB was also always keen to point out that there were more practicing Theosophists outside the society than were in it. It takes a lot more to become an occultist, but a Theosophist is someone who is trying to live a compassionate life and tries to bring about peace on earth and goodwill to all beings. It's a way of life, a state of consciousness, nothing to do with any designations or rules and regulations. Truth is truth. It is beyond the realms of human conception. People who have genuine compassion are those who have become aware of this oneness and have a desire to restore the broken harmony in others. In this way, they are working along with karma. And goodwill is in short supply in modern society, though there are many hard-working people who are trying to implement it. The world sorely needs those who keep this light shining. It is never a hopeless task, as long as a few are aware of the importance of trying to foster goodwill in the hearts of all beings. At the beginning of time, the sacred Om was sounded, and this one vibration brought into being and reverberated down through all the planes of being until it reached the lowest level, which is our physical world. By then it was shattered into billions of sounds, but the base of all sounds we hear on this planet is the sacred Om. We are on a journey back from the illusion of separateness to the oneness that the Om represents. We are going home, if you like. There is no place like home. Then we can become that centre of spiritual action that HPB writes about. We are only limited by our perception of ourselves and of others. We have infinite potential. There's no limit to what we can become if we only try to understand what it is to be human in the true sense of the word. There is no light at the end of the tunnel, because ultimately the tunnel is an illusion, and there is only light. Inwardly, we are immortal beings. The turning point in our own existence is to start to think of ourselves as spiritual and immortal beings. I mentioned earlier that we are denizens of eternity. We are children of the light, children of the divine light. When we do this, we see things differently. We don't cling to concepts and intellectual ideas. Now, I was looking at YouTube at some live cams, and these are cameras that you can look at that show places around the world in real time. I really like looking at these. I spend most of my time now when I'm online looking at these because it's so fascinating. And it was poignant to see how so many places deserted during the time of this pandemic. But also interesting to note how similar life was all over the world. People walking dogs along the beach, chatting in street corners, pushing prams over zebra-type crossings, doing the shopping, etc. All over the world. All this may seem rather obvious to you all, but something struck me watching all this, the oneness we share, even on a physical level of being in general. I also looked at some of the most beautiful places in the world, lovely sea views and mountains, and in the midst were towns and villages. Nature, I thought, is so harmonious and beautiful, and yet when you enter towns and villages, there's so much discord created by the men and women living there. So much disharmony caused by our divorce from the natural world. Even when in the midst of it, it is all down to the orientation of the mind. Do we allow ourselves to be consumed by externals, or do we find the illumination that comes from within? So most people nowadays will say that we only have one life. There was a saying a few years ago that seems to have gone out of fashion. It was YOLO, Y-O-L-O, which means you only live once. Now from a material sense, that doesn't make much sense, but occultly it does. We actually only have one life. It may be broken into countless sojourns into the world of Maya or illusion, but the one life in us is unchanging, whether we are in or out of incarnation. So in reality, we do have only one life. This struck me whilst reading Yoka Daisha's Song of Enlightenment. He's a Japanese Zen master. For walking is Zen, sitting is Zen. Whether talking or remaining silent, whether moving or standing quiet, the essence itself is ever at ease. Even when greeted with swords and spears, it never loses its quiet way. So with poisonous drugs, they fail to perturb its serenity. So as I said, Yoka Daisha was a Chinese Zen master who lived between 655 and 713 AD. And this reinforced some of my other favourite lines from The Voice of the Silence, which says, and these are very worth meditating upon: have patience, candidate, as one who fears no failure, courts no success. Fix thy soul's gaze upon the star whose ray thou art, the flaming star that shines within the lightless depths of ever being, the boundless fields of the unknown. Have perseverance, as one who doth for evermore endure. Thy shadows live and vanish, that which in thee shall live forever, that which in thee knows, for it is knowledge, is not a fleeting life. 'Tis the man that was, that is, and will be, for whom the hour shall never strike. The hour shall never strike. And from chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita, the Edward Arnold translation known as the Song Celestial: never the spirit was born, the spirit shall cease to be never. Never was time it was not. End and beginning are dreams. Birthless and deathless and changeless remaineth the spirit forever. Death hath not touched it at all. Dead, though the house of it seems. And also, from the Bhagavad Gita, I say to thee, weapons reach not the life, flames burn it not, waters cannot overwhelm, nor dry winds wither it. Impenetrable, unentered, unassailed, unharmed, untouched, immortal, all-arriving, stable, sure, invisible, ineffable by word and thought, uncompassed, ever all itself. Thus is the soul declared. How wilt thou then, knowing it so, grieve when thou shouldst not grieve? Grieve when thou shouldst not grieve. And I doubt if these teachings have really sunk into our consciousness really, though we may have read similar from many traditions many times. But we still tend to cling to this brief episode in our pilgrimage as if it were the only one, when in fact it is just a minute part of our journey, 8 or 9 decades in millions of years. As the Diamond Sutra says, and this is how to contemplate our conditioned existence in this fleeting world, like a tiny drop of dew or a bubble floating in a stream, like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, or a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. So is all conditioned existence, to be seen. I'll repeat that, but it's so insightful. Like a tiny drop of dew or a bubble floating in a stream, like a flash of lightning in a summer cloud, or a flickering lamp, an illusion, a phantom, or a dream. So is all conditioned existence, to be seen. So this should completely transform the way we look at ourselves and others, just by the quotations I've given. The dictionary definition of kindness is the quality of being friendly, generous, and considerate. If we try to remove the barriers of selfishness that stands between us and others, whether as individuals, families, or countries, etc., then we truly understand the meaning of the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Beyond the cliche, of course. Because we simply can't separate ourselves from others in reality, only in the thoughts projected in the lower aspects of our mind, which creates and gives credence to illusions. Once we realise that the same spirit animates every one of us, we cannot help but try our best to be kind and considerate to others. As I said earlier, it is this feeling of separateness that fosters selfishness. When we learn to practice kindness in our day-to-day lives, we are on our way to realising what it means to be truly human and helping to promote this universal brotherhood of humanity, regardless of race, creed, sex, caste and colour. And just a final word from Gautama Buddha: as the rain falls on the just and unjust alike, let your heart be untroubled by judgments, and let your kindness rain down on all. Thank you. I don't know how this will have turned out. It's just an experiment, and hopefully you'll be able to see and hear me when I upload this to a new page I've just started, which is the Theosophical Society Bolton Lodge page channel on YouTube, which I'm hoping I can add more to. So thanks for all for listening and watching. I hope that you will perhaps leave some comments, or if anyone does actually listen to it, I'll put it on Facebook anyway later. So let's just finish with a little meditation. This time I will sound this, and then we'll have a quiet moment, like taking what's been said. I'll start that again. Thank you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace.